Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always, contacting me over radio frequencies, is Tara.
Greetings, citizens.
If I'd remembered what the lingo was, it's like breaker, niner, blah 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 blah. I don't remember.
CQ.
Some. This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together, we've watched a movie, we talk about it. It's really quite that simple. And today's episode is a Patreon vote winner, because every month on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, our $5 and up patrons get to vote between 4 movies. The theme for this was actually just a very simple thing. It was the alphabet. We had a movie beginning with A, a movie beginning with B, C, and D, and of course the C movie won, because we're here today to talk about Contact. So we'll start spoiler free, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get to spoilers, but this is a Robert Zemeckis directed film from 1997. And just in case you weren't sure of that, you hear a little bit of Space Girls at the start, just to set it into its time period. But this is a movie about first contact. Jodie Foster plays I have no idea what her job title is, but she's
astronomer.
I guess, okay, she's an astronomer, but I feel like she has a more specific job title because she works with, like, frequencies and satellites and radio sound waves and all that.
She works with radio, radioscopes.
But she plays this character who is always like dreamed of finding something out there. The flashbacks as a little girl is her on an old shortwave radio trying to contact different states, and just for the fun of it, just because that's but she's this smart, wunderkind style character who takes these jobs and ultimately, of course, does hear something coming from space, and it's about deciphering this message, what it means, and the reaction of the greater community on Earth as to what we should do about this, what those messages are, and the debates over should we treat them as hostile, should we follow the instructions that may or may not be in those messages, and so on and so on. I'm trying to keep this as light as possible, spoilers wise, but that's where a lot of the plot goes. So it's funny because it starts off being like, oh, this could just be a drama if they never hear anything, but of course they do hear something, so it veers more sci-fi the more it goes. But by the time you get to the end, there's a lot more science fiction-y stuff kind of coming into it. But that is the basic thing. Also, Matthew McConaughey is in this long before his McConaissance. This was like deep in his rom-com era, if you will, or maybe even early on in his rom-com era. So maybe like out of, not out of style, but like a slightly different role for him, because he's not in a rom-com here. This is not a rom-com,
Right, and he's not dazed and confused. Talking about high school girls.
I've never seen Dazed and Confused, but I am familiar with.
Oh, that's like his famous line, like, the great thing about high school girls, I get older, they stay the same age. He's such a slime ball.
Yeah, sounds like a treat. So that's basically it. We'll talk a bit more of the cast in a minute, and we'll talk about stuff. But I guess I have to start off with asking Tara the question that I always ask. Tara, how did you feel about Contact?
Love it. Love this film. I think it's amazing, and I actually haven't watched it in like maybe 10 years or so. It's been a long time. I've had the Blu-ray because I always own a copy of Contact. It was a very important film for me when it came out. I saw this film like 4 times in the theater, I think, and it came out at a very like influential age for me. The thing that I remember the most about the film is just how much I attached myself to the character of Eleanor Arroway and the things that she loves, even like the people she loves and her struggles, just in a society that like doesn't listen to women. And I really loved watching her character throughout this, especially because like when I was very young and hanging out with other friends who are my age, and they're all girls also, and we would like play games and role play and during like recess and stuff, and we would play like Power Rangers, and everybody wanted to be the Red Ranger. Like all of us, we were all girls, and we all wanted to be, you know, the hero of the Power Rangers. Like nobody wants to be the girls, even though we all are girls. I know you have a very different opinion of the females in Power Rangers, but when we were young and watching
Kimberly Hart, my heart.
I know she was the worst.
Also, it feels weird though. It's you all want it to be red. Like green was where it was at. Okay, if we were going fantasy.
Well, I mean, this was like the first year of Power Rangers. I don't remember. Like, I think he came in the movie, right? Or
no. He was in the first year of the show.
Well, I remember the main like 5.
It was the 5 for a while before he came in, but it was like season 1 of Power Rangers is like 50 episodes. He came in at like episode 23 or something like that.
Well, like when I remember playing Power Rangers, it was 5, and we all had to like pick one. There were 4 of us, and nobody wanted to be pink or yellow. Like we all wanted to be the boys, because the boys have all the hero roles. They have all the leadership roles. They have all the respected roles. And the girls look pretty, talk about their nails, and that's it. Like those are, like if you're a girl, your story is that you'll fall in love and the main guy will choose you. That's like the thing that you can look forward to one day. So it was so nice to have a film where like you're watching a woman and she is struggling, but this is her hero's journey. Like it does follow that format of like getting like an oracle and getting a message from God, really, and her journey, and like there's a whole death and rebirth that comes out of it, and there's so much going on in this film. Like watching it now takes me back, and I get really emotional watching it. And I really do think that it's just a really, really great film. And very important to me, obviously.
I think that was a really interesting lens to view it through. I don't have this early experience. I've seen it once before now, and that was like, I don't know, like 15 years ago, you know, maybe high school age, maybe a little bit later. But I think that was a very heartfelt statement, which will work as a good primer for the conversation to come. Okay, I'll get this out of the way. What the hell? Primer. It's pronounced primer, you stupid writers and movie-making people. Primer.
Are you sure there's just not multiple ways that you can pronounce it?
Maybe it's a different word. Maybe I'm confusing. Maybe there's a separate word called primer that I'm confusing with primer. But every time they said, I felt like it was like someone stepped on something. I'm like, you know, I was feeling it. I was feeling it in my bones. And I realized you just said this beautiful speech about how this meant to you as a young girl growing up, because it was a strong female lead character who got to be the hero of the story. And I'm starting this with primer. I realize the male privilege here of focusing on something stupid is at full play. I'm fully aware of that.
We'll talk about male privilege in this review.
Well, we will. I acknowledge that completely. But goddamn, every time they said primer, I wanted to punch something. Anyway.
I don't think it was that many times, but like, okay, I understand that would be annoying.
It just sounded so stupid.
I'm not convinced that it's the wrong pronunciation. There might be just multiple ways to pronounce it.
There might be, but people say you can say GIF and not GIF. Those people are wrong. Okay,
I do agree with that.
It's a GIF. God damn it! If you say GIF, you're on the wrong side of history, and that's just like where we are in life.
Well, I mean, you know, the 90s were different. You know, you can call the internet the net, and everyone knew what you were talking about. But if you refer to it as the net now, everyone looks at you like you're insane.
Oh yeah, I'm going to walk in the next day. I was surfing the web.
Oh man, I remember the ads of like kids on surfboards, like going through computer screens and stuff. God. And we get some nice like Windows 3.1 porn in this too.
We also get some really dodgy looking, like, I'm pretty sure emails have never looked and functioned like this. Because it's
it's
like instant
there's
chat.
like early Skype on it also.
It's like instant chat, but it's like cold emails. It's weird.
It's science fiction.
90s was a weird time for computers. Hollywood didn't understand them yet, so they just said they either pretended they could do nothing or they pretended they could do anything. And
right. Well, there's even like some there's even like a plane that shows up at one point that lands like a helicopter. I'm like, that doesn't exist.
But yeah, I'll get into silly things to talk about, which is partly what this show is. But to actually give my thoughts on the movie, this is not an important movie to me the way it is to Tara. I don't have this attachment to it, and I'd remembered the premise. I remembered the ending by and large. I remembered the core ideas. I had forgotten a lot of it though. And I'm going to be positive, but kind of a lukewarm positive on this. I think that
you and everybody else, really.
Honestly, I think some of it is just too schmaltzy Hollywood cheese at times. Like some of the ideas that it's going for are really good and solid, but then there's like cheesy flashbacks with slow motion running, and like I was shocked that Alan Silvestri did the score to this, because I would have sworn it was Thomas Newman. I would have sworn it every fibre of my being, because it's that cheesy 90s Thomas Newman sounding piano that comes in, and it's just a little too heartwarming at times. And there's moments where speeches are made that feel a little too on the nose, where it beats you over the head with the statement that it's trying to make. Moments where, like, I'm all for setup and payoff. I am. Like, obviously that's the fundamentals, right? Setup and payoff ultimately is like you can almost just take the Chekhov's gun joke and just extrapolate that to every sort of setup and payoff. So, like, including just ideas that are mentioned. So, on the one hand, yes, I appreciate that a character brings up Occam's razor at one point, right? And then it's brought up later on in the film again. But when it's brought up later on in the film, there's like staring at each other like it's a big moment, and like what it means to everyone involved, and it goes a little too hard on the sentimental stuff, I think, to the point where it feels a little I guess I would have preferred a more cerebral version of this story rather than one that's as small. Because there's some stuff at the end and I'm going to keep this as spoiler free as I can, but there's some stuff at the end that if you just change the tone of it a little bit, it could feel very 2001. And obviously this doesn't. It never feels like that at all, because it just doesn't have that tone. It doesn't have that feel. It's going for something very different, which is fine. Like that obviously it's totally fine that it's going for something different. But there's kind of this just like Hollywood sheen to the whole thing, and some of the character interactions that feel a little bit like cheesy Hollywood to me. And I never kind of completely shook that throughout the movie. So, and I'm nervous because I knew Tara really loved this, and I was warned, even threatened, one might say, a couple of times before the show started today about this conversation. So I'm being as diplomatic as I possibly can be.
I mean, honestly, this is what I expected to hear from you, especially after the Dune review.
Oh,
I get it. Like, a lot of people don't like this movie, and I think a lot of it comes from the ending. People are just disappointed by the ending. I think the ending works. I think if you did something different, you risk it being too Hollywood in a way. Like, well, we have to show this because that's what everyone expects.
I think it's almost too Hollywood in a different direction, though, and we can talk about that when we get to the ending. I
think it's pretty ballsy.
I will say as well that there is one other big thing in this movie that doesn't quite ever sit right with me, and it's one of the core ideas of the movie, and part of it's a personal bias.
Is it God?
I mean, I wasn't going to get into it too much, but yes, the religious element of the movie I do think is quite murky, and I don't know if I don't know if the movie quite says something clear by the end that I took away from it. And there wasn't times where, honestly, as someone who is an atheist, right, and let's get that bias out of the way immediately, there are times in this movie where I felt like I was being preached to. And once you give me that feeling, once you give me the feeling that you're trying to say, oh no, but you atheists, like, this is all about understanding how we feel about God. Once you get to that point where I feel like you're trying to teach me that feeling, there is an inherent kind of disconnect of, this is starting to feel a little bit. Joe's funny about this. This is almost like I'm going to try and legitimately give a critique, a fair and balanced critique of something that I do legitimately think crosses over into being something that, like, in another direction. Like, so many things these days, if there's anything remotely political in something, a group of people will call it SJW trash, or they'll call it, oh, it's got an agenda, it's trying to push all these ideas down our throats and things like that. I don't think this is pushing an idea down my throat, but I think effectively what I'm going to talk about when I try to talk about this later is the more, like, good faith take on, like, when a movie does step over a little bit of a line into, oh, now I feel like I'm, like, someone's trying to convince me of something that fundamentally just goes against something I feel or believe or whatever, right? So does that make sense? Does that?
I understand. I disagree.
That's fair. And I'm
also an atheist.
Yeah,
obviously.
Honestly, the most interesting thing about this movie when I got to the last 10 minutes was, like, I cannot wait to hear, like, Tara's, because I know you loved this movie. So unless you came in and said you were shocked that it, like, you've changed your mind because it's been a long time since you watched it, I was legitimately excited to hear what you like about a lot of this stuff towards the end of the movie, because I know how you feel about religion.
Yes. Yeah. No, I understand.
Yeah.
It could be maybe going against my beliefs to defend it. But I think part of what is encouraging is that Carl Sagan, up until his death, was very, very involved in this production. He wrote the book for it, which I read many years ago. And although I don't remember the religion aspect being as heavy in this, like, obviously religion was always an obstacle in this and in the book, but, like, the themes of religion is not I don't say it's absent, but it's not really this movie has a lot more of that. It's
more front and center. I mean, in this movie there's a point where it's basically the main thing.
Oh yeah, totally. I would say absolutely it is. But the fact that Carl Sagan, who is also a staunch atheist or agnostic, I'm not quite sure, but, like, he had, I mean, if you look up Carl Sagan's, like, quotes about God, like, they're very clear on what he feels. And it is very much the position of Eleanor Arroway. But he, was very involved in this film, and he obviously knew what the themes of it were going to be. And I think he is a bit, like, this message, I think, is okay. Especially when we get more into, like, the themes of technology and whatnot, like, and just division, stuff like that.
One thing that I do want to make clear, though, I do not have any opposition to the idea of faith-based characters, and it's certainly not faith in storytelling. In fact, even with my own personal feelings on actual religion and faith, sometimes the idea of faith, admittedly, I tend to lean towards more when it's not tied to religion per se, but sometimes some of the most interesting stories and characters do come from ideas of where characters need to take something on faith, and the idea of a character believing something is really important. I actually get into that all the time in storytelling. It's a really important thing, because ultimately believing in something and having faith in an idea or a person, or, like, nothing is more fulfilling to me than when a character who is otherwise cynical chooses to believe in someone else and then is rewarded for it. Just as an example, like, the idea of faith as a storytelling, like, driving force and a place to take genuine emotion from. And on the subject of Carl Sagan and sort of pivoting to that, like, I'm not that familiar with Carl Sagan's work. I've heard his famous Pale Blue Dot speech, which is wonderful, and even that speech talks about how silence is humbling and how it makes us, like, realize just how small we are and all the rest of it. Like, space is a humbling experience, and in a lot of ways, like, science does become akin to the religion to a lot of people. Not in that you worship it in the same way, but ultimately, and this movie,
your beliefs are based on it.
Yeah, and
in a way, although it's hard to call them beliefs, but, like, yeah, this. Whereas people who have faith have something else that's backing them up. People who don't have that have science in a way. So, like, they are diametrically opposed that way.
So, like, making the comparison and drawing those comparisons is totally fine, and I kind of get what you're going, like what the movie's going for with that. But I think it basically gets a bit too hammy for me at certain points. There's moments when that piano music comes in and like emotional speeches are being made where I am just a little drawn out of it because it feels a bit too, like I can feel like it's just not a Ron Howard movie, but it feels like Ron Howard is helping direct some of these scenes. I can feel the Ron Howardness of some, and it's not that Ron Howard's a bad director. Ron Howard's made some solid movies, but like Ron Howard and Thomas Newman, that's what this movie feels like, and it's not. It's Robert Zemeckis and Alan Silvestri. It's the Back to the Future combination of Robert Zemeckis and Alan Silvestri, but it doesn't feel like that team making this movie. It feels very distinct from that. It's not about some of the cast actually, because I was kind of laughing that, you know, Tom Skerritt's a big part of the movie, and he's this character who doesn't really believe in Eleanor's like dreams of finding like life through radio waves, but once it does happen, he's kind of this skeevy guy who starts to like take a lot of the credit and starts to like worm his way in. I did laugh quite a bit when I realized that when when they stop funding her work and she goes looking for other funding, well, if one actor from Alien won't give you the money, I'm sure another one will, because then John Hurt shows up in a different role, and that was kind of amusing to me.
He's the Elon Musk of this time.
Yeah. David Morse, who I've known from a bunch of things. I'm used to him playing a villain more often than not, but he's in here as the father in the flashback.
Oh, that's interesting. I guess he was the villain in 12 Monkeys in a way, huh? I think that's the thing that we've seen him in. Yeah,
he was the villain in that awful, what was it, Disturbia, which was like the Rear Window ripoff.
Honestly, like I know him from TV. I don't really know him so much from movies as I do from TV.
I've seen him. I mean,
he's always been like the love interest and the hunk.
Oh sure, you know? The hunk. Really? Okay. I'll take it
I mean, he's got a thing. He's got a thing going on. It's the curly hair.
He's not an ugly man by any means, but I just don't see hunk, I guess. What surprised me actually is I had like a weird moment at the start of the movie, because I was like, oh, this little girl playing young Jodie Foster. I was like, oh, she looks a little bit like Jenna Malone. I didn't really think anything else about it. And then the second time I saw her, I'm like, you know what? She really does look like young I'm going to look this up. Is she Jenna Malone? And sure enough, I was like, because in my head I was doing the math. I'm like, would she be this age about now? Does this line up with who she is now? Which is funny to me, because this is a weird two-sided thing in this movie, where Jodie Foster was an actor as a kid, so we know what Jodie Foster looked like, and Jenna Malone is an actor as an adult, so we know what she grew up to look like. So it's this really weird thing where I know what both of them look like at these ages. It's like flipped. Yeah. So it's just kind of I don't really have a point here, except that it's just kind of funny and weird. And
I mean, I think as a child, Jenna Malone can like, I think she would look. She looks like she would grow up to look like Jodie Foster. Like, it's close enough.
Yeah, but I know what she looks like, though. So I'm like,
actually, every time I've seen her since this film, I think that's the girl from Contact.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't even know what I first noticed Jenna Malone in. I definitely saw her in Kick-Ass 2, which is a terrible film. But Kick-Ass 1's great, Kick-Ass 2's terrible. But I don't think I didn't really remember from that. It wasn't until later I realized it was her in that. I think it was, you know, she's in Neon Demon, and she's in one of the Hunger Games, I think. She's in a bunch of stuff around then.
Yeah. I mean, she was a child. I think she was in Stepmom, the Susan Sarandon film that came out shortly after this. She was one of the kids in that, I think.
Oh, sure. So other actors that are worth mentioning, William Fichtner is in here, and I like him a lot. He's one of those character actors who pops up a lot, especially in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, he's great. I love his character in this. And did you check his name?
Kent?
His name is Kent Clark.
Oh, I didn't hear his last name. No, okay.
Yeah, his name's Kent Clark. Actually, he's named after a real life SETI astronomer who was in fact blind, and his name was Kent something else.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So was someone a Superman fan who named this character, or like
I suppose, what? Yeah.
It's kind of impossible to escape that, right?
Well, he's got some superhuman abilities.
Yeah. James Woods is in here as the slimy guy from the White House who's like really cynical about everything. Angela Bassett's got a small role here as well, working at the White House.
Fierce.
So you've got a pretty notable cast surrounding the leads, but it's just very much Jodie Foster.
And we got a Busey.
Oh, we do have a Busey. Yeah. So not the good. I mean, it's Jake Busey. It's not Gary Busey. Gary Busey would have this movie would have been elevated if it was Gary Busey instead of Jake. Jake Busey's character in this I don't like that much, and I'm going to talk about that in spoilers. You can't really talk about him without spoilers. So it's a small role, but it's a memorable, pivotal one.
You have to remember that it's mentioned in this film, but this is not that far from the Heaven's Gate cult.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Just keep that in mind when you talk about him.
My problem isn't conceptual. My problem is, I guess, the performance with the hair and clothes, and just the way it builds to him just feels really cheesy. But I'll talk a bit more about that later. Plus, he's got a face that's like that's actor Jake Busey. Like I don't see like an individual, like a real person.
I mean, I only know him from this and from Starship Troopers. I know you've seen him in other things because I think we talked about it in Starship Troopers. But like, yeah, it's great to see a Busey on screen. I don't know what you have a problem with.
I mean,
he looks so much like his dad.
Jake Busey's all right, but Gary Busey, that's the real like gold mine.
Well, he's a treat for sure.
Yeah. Highly recommend Gary Busey Pet Judge if you got Amazon Prime, everyone. Real treat. So, but it's really Jodie Foster. Matthew McConaughey's obviously the co-build lead. Although, to be honest, I would argue that Tom Skerritt's actually probably got more screen time than he does.
I'd say the importance of McConaughey because of what he represents is probably a bit more than Tom Skerritt.
No, that's fair. That's a fair point.
I think that I do actually really like McConaughey in this. He's kind of like, I'd say this is also pretty close to Amistad, where he's like trying to be a serious actor before he's like sucked into, whatever, Kate movies.
How to Lose a Guy in 15
Kate Hudson films and stuff
or
like
whatever that movie's called.
The Ghost of Girlfriend's Past and stuff. Yeah. Before we lost him for a little while, and then he came back into the drama.
And then Christopher Nolan came along and said, "Would you like to be reconnaissance in Interstellar?
Would you like to have a meme?"
Give him a thing. Yeah, so I guess there's not too much left to talk about, spoiler free. I don't think it's a bad. I think it's a very easy watch. For all the critiques that I'm going to give it and talk about what doesn't work for me, I do think it's a very easy. I mean, it's 2.5 hours, so it's a bit of a long watch, but it is an easy enough watch whilst you're watching it. I mean, the one flip side of it being kind of maybe a little too Hollywood and like sentimental is that it's a very like easy thing to sit through because of that. It's not a challenging film in that sense, but it is. I have some critiques. I have some things that don't work, and I do think there's some fundamentals that we'll get to. We'll get to. So
I love this movie. I'm really excited to talk about it.
I'm worried. So full spoilers.
I'll be nice.
Full spoilers for cunt. I'll be nice. I'm going to be nice. Joe, it's funny. There's a moment early on in the film. It's not quite like we've already met him, and we've had like sort of the extended prologue of like the Puerto Rican stuff. But the first time I think we see Matthew McConaughey, like after that, he's on TV. I think is it Larry King he's on, and he's talking about his book, and he's talking about technology because it's alluded to that he's a little bit anti-technology and thinks that technology's like
things that are supposed to bring us together are separating us.
And the part that made me laugh here, this is just purely an anecdotal thing, but he talks about how we're shopping at home and we're surfing the web, but it's just making us more alone. And I kind of laughed a little bit at that because I'm like, well, I'm going to do a podcast later with Tara, who's on the other side of the planet, which the technology of the internet is allowing. So I mean, I don't know if more alone's accurate in the grand scheme of things, but
Well, I don't think they had Skype back then, although the movie says otherwise.
Yes.
Well, the government had some sort of Zoom technology.
But even in 97, you could text chat with people, though. Like, that was a thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was arguments to be made that are just kind of glossed over.
It's true. It's true. Although I don't think he's wrong. Like, I think, like, there is a sense of isolation that comes from the comfort of being able to have these quick fixes. Like, we can make friendships online, so why do we need to have real people to go outside with? Or like the superficialness of like Instagram and like Facebook and stuff like that. Like, look at all this this great life I have.
Yes,
but it's all just like you're only seeing the good stuff.
To be fair, you're bringing up a lot of things that are long after this movie's inception. So
yeah, he just saw it coming.
I'm thinking of what the internet was like in 1997.
Well, I mean, chat rooms were around in like 97,
yeah,
right?
Chat rooms were, but I didn't even touch the internet until like 2000, 2001. So, like, a lot of people, like, internet, yes, it was in a lot of homes in 1997, but it wasn't a saturation point yet, right? We're not quite at the point where everyone's using internet.
Right. I think his point is just that technology is invented to make things easier, and sometimes the things that we want to make easier are the things that are scary, like going outside and meeting people. And that's something that gets lost because it's just easier to do it online, but there's something missing from it.
I feel like you're adding a whole lot to this that wasn't said in the scene. That's what
I take away from it watching it in the 2021 lens.
No, I get how you're adding all this because I can see how you could, but I don't think a lot of that's in the scene itself. I guess the point.
Well, I think the theme of loneliness is absolutely in this film, like from the beginning.
Oh, sure. But the point of what I'm making here is really less about the actual like statement in the scene and more that this was the first of many times in this film where Matthew McConaughey said something and I said, "F you, you asshole." I disagree.
Okay, yeah. I think this is in here because I'll just make one statement.
Okay.
I think this is in here because Eleanor represents science and technology and thinks that she trusts that are tactile. And he's saying that that is going to cause you to be alone. So her search for like what's out there and like the parallel that it is for people who are searching for God, she's searching for a voice through technology and stuff, is causing her to be alone because she can't have real relationships like the one with a spiritual man like McConaughey's character.
Yeah, she doesn't they have this one night stand. She doesn't call him. She leaves without mention. We see that she is kind of she keeps to herself.
Her turn happens when he says like, she says, "Oh, my mother died. I didn't really know her. My father died when I was 9." And he says, "Oh, so you're alone." And then that's when she like has the turn and says, "I got to go to work and stuff," and decides never to call him. Yeah.
So, no, Matthew McConaughey though, there's a lot of things that he says in this movie that, like, I just like, oh god, like you really don't want me to agree with you, don't you? you really. Like, anytime the subject of religion like having any impact on any decisions being made, is just something I don't like at all. Church and state, keep those bad boys separate. They have no place.
But I mean we're outliers, especially in that year. So like. Another reason why I attached so much to Eleanor in this film when I was young is that she had to have relationships with people who had these fantastical ideas like about God and stuff that for me was totally foreign. The only difference for her is that she seemed to be born with some sort of religion and left it and chose to leave it, where I didn't have that at all. Like I was just born into a family of agnostic people. So like, but that parallel of like everyone ostracizing you and saying that feeling bad for you because you don't have this is was just something I just really related to, like having to like have relationships with people, friendship or otherwise, who are spiritual, and just the problems that brings, like not knowing if you can if you're really going to be taking them seriously or respecting them, even like to a certain degree, if they have these other beliefs than you, which I think beliefs is the wrong word, but like, you know what I mean.
Yeah, for context on the flip side though, I guess I should probably balance this out by saying my experience is very different in that when I was growing up, like no one, like I never heard anyone, barring maybe like one person in my entirety of school, ever talk about religion. No one.
I didn't know anybody who was like me until maybe like my first job, which was like around 16. But like for me, I was the only person I knew who didn't go to church. Maybe it's just the areas that we grew up in were different. But like I grew up in Canada and in the US.
But I want to make this clear that like for the scope of this, because no one I knew went to church. Church was something that was kind of like joked about, like the school would have maybe some end of year services in a church, and all of us would be miserable having to listen to any if there was a minister giving like a speech or a sermon or whatever, right? I don't even know the terminology. This is like how little like.
But I don't know either.
Like we all joked, we legitimately were joking in like high school that church, at least, I mean, we weren't really thinking of it on a global scale, just locally, but we were thinking it's only old people who go to church. Like the churches are all going to have to shut down in like 20 years because they're all going to be dead, and no one's going to be there. Like church is not something that anyone talked about. No one cared, and it wasn't so much that everyone was like talking about being atheist necessarily. Just no one really cared. No one talked about it. And
yeah, I have very different experiences.
Well,
like
no,
for me,
which is why I'm trying to make my experience clear here, because when I watch a movie like this and there's American characters who put such stock in how important it is that people care about God, it is so alien to me, and like it actually actively makes me angry thinking there's people that this has to be an important factor in any kind of decision making, because it shouldn't be. And I think I want to make that clear, because when I get to points in this movie where Matthew McConaughey says things like, we can't have you representing humanity because like you think 95% of people are suffering for some sort of mass delusion, like my gut response to that, almost in defiance, because you think this is important, because you're thinking decisions should be based on this, is for me to go, well, yeah, they kind of are delusional though. This is a kind of a mass delusion, if I'm honest with you. Like, I'm not saying that, like, it doesn't necessarily have to cause any harm, but there is like a delusion element here.
Well, we're all just searching for the same thing. I think that's the point. And whether or not like people have that spiritual side of them, or if you're like Eleanor, who has to go through this other journey to find something, I mean, she ends up in the same spot. Well, I mean, anyway, I had a very different experience, like from very early on. Like when I first started going to school, one of my earliest memories are people asking me like, or telling me I'm going to hell because I didn't know what God was. And that was in Canada, which I don't know. That's no one I knew was like me. Everybody went to church. Everybody believed in God. And then when I moved to California, it was even worse. Like I lost friends over it because I said my family doesn't believe in God, and people didn't talk to me anymore. Or like my sister, who was in the Harry Potter age, where she had friends that weren't allowed to go see Harry Potter movies because they had witches in them, didn't celebrate Halloween because it was a pagan holiday. Like it was even more intense out here. Like it's definitely something that trying to build relationships, friendships or otherwise, in it with people who have very different beliefs than you is a challenge. But like you don't want to be alone. So like how do you deal with it? It's just something I definitely latched onto, especially at that age.
Yeah, it's not something that like it's not something I even remotely relate to. Typically, because so few people here are that religious, I've never had to like make do with someone who is going to say things like you're going to hell because you don't believe in God or anything like that.
Don't even know what it was.
Honestly, like, the subject of religion and God growing up, if it did come up, because there was, the one mandatory class where you had to learn about various religions. Like, honestly, it was mostly just like really boring to everyone. Like, most people just thought, this is sleep inducing. We don't want, we don't care about this. That was kind of the attitude for most people.
Okay. I mean, I always enjoyed those classes just because it gave me a better understanding of like where other people are, and it reaffirmed what I believed in.
Oh, I mean, I'm not saying as an adult there's no value in understanding what other people believe. I'm saying at the time when I was 13, 14, I was, oh my god, this is so boring. When is lunch? Like that like I'm saying what was going through my head at the time, and it's it makes, and like I said, I have no problem with a lot of religious concepts or characters in movies, because I'm watching a fictional movie and I'm watching movies that have ghosts or aliens or witches or superheroes in it. Like, in a movie, God can exist. Sure, why not? Like, it is a movie, after all. And I realize this may be one of the more controversial conversations that we've ever had on this show. And if we have any religious regulars who are listening to this and are feeling alienated, I apologize. I don't want you to feel like I'm shitting on you by any means.
I mean, it wouldn't be the first time we've done it.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, but like, this is such a heavy topic in this movie that it's hard to avoid it, and it's hard to avoid the bias that I think both of us bring to this. But clearly there's enough other things for you to relate to in this that it's not impacted as much for you as it is for me. Whereas for me, every time, like by the time, like, I get what it's doing by the end of the movie, where like Eleanor has something, because he goes on this whole thing at the start when they're talking about his beliefs, where he talks about how he went through this experience, and she says, well, are you sure you experienced this, or you just needed to experience this, or you need to believe this, so you had this moment. And but one of the first things that annoyed me in the movie actually is you can't prove this exists or anything. And his comeback to this is, well, did you love your father? And she's like, yeah, obviously. And he's like, well, prove it then. And I'm like, this isn't the same thing. This is a false equivalency.
It's the idea of trying to explain something that is not tangible. Like, it's something you have to, it's an emotional experience rather than like something that's like, well, 2 + 2 is 4.
Yeah, but like, emotions are understandable, and we all feel emotions. Like, we all, well, I mean, unless you're a sociopath, I guess, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. Like, it felt like,
it just puts her in the spot, you know.
It felt like such a gotcha moment, and I'm like, no, that doesn't get her at all. Like, she like proving one's love. Like, do you know what? People do try and prove their love all the time. A lot of romantic gestures are kind of like trying to tell someone how you feel about them. That's kind of why people say it's important to tell each other how they feel and do things for each other. Like,
are they doing it because they really love them, or because they want to sleep with them?
Well, I was thinking the context of a father and daughter here, so I mean, I wasn't really.
Well, you said romantic gestures.
Oh, sure. Okay, sure. Yes. Okay. I mean, obviously, larger scheme, but here specifically, we're talking about a father and daughter. That was the first moment where I'm like, I don't buy that as an argument. Like, I just don't think that works. And I've definitely heard better arguments for explaining this than that. I don't know. I don't think that one hit true for me at all. But anyway, the point of this whole thing is that he has this speech with her, and the idea being is that he feels something, but he can't prove it, but he knows it's real. And the entire movie's plot gets her in the very end to have an experience that she can't prove, so that she then has to be put on, like, literally on a trial. She's in like a hearing in Washington, and she's like, this and this all happened. This amazing journey through a wormhole that took me to an alien planet where I spoke to an alien who looked like my dad. All of that this happened, but there's no proof.
Not just that, like, it is truly like she goes to heaven. Like, she dies and goes to heaven. She gets buried in a tomb with no doors, and she drops into a white light. She describes, the first thing she says is, "Oh God," and she goes in through this tunnel and then comes out at the end and is able to speak to a ghost, the ghost of her father. but it's also like through the aliens.
Well, metaphorically, it's all metaphorically. It's not literal.
Right. It's not literal, but like it is very much like she has died and gone to heaven to see her loved ones.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I kinda hate that she sees her dad.
I don't mind it. I know people hate it, and we sort of talked about it in the beginning about how I think that's why people don't like the film, is because they think it's a cop out to not show the aliens, because we're all waiting for it. The whole movie is building up to this contact moment.
No, I want to make this clear. That is not my problem with this. I'm not saying that we should see the aliens. If anything, this is a movie that should leave it more up to mystery anyway. Mm-hmm. It's just too sentimental and mushy. It's just, and I know immediately he says, or she says, this isn't real, and he's like, yeah, we thought this would be easier to like take a form that we read your mind.
That's the whole point. That the whole point is that they're not there to make contact like she's hoping. They're there just to say you're not alone. There is something else out there, and send her back. That's the whole point of the visit, is for her to feel comfort from not being alone in the universe.
And I think that's
what we're looking for.
But I think that's unsatisfying. And it's what we're looking for to a point, but that's a bit absolute. I don't necessarily think that's what everyone's looking for. Like, I think this movie and this story engineers the whole thing so that it's a directly comparable thing as to what she's looking for through her science to what religious people are looking for through their religion. And when I get to that hearing at the end, and she's sitting there and she's like, as a scientist, I have to admit, no, I can't prove this, and I would be just as skeptical if I was you. Like, and I'm glad she said that, because I was really worried she wasn't going to acknowledge any of that, because she would be skeptical, and she should be. And I'm kind of on their side, to be honest. Like, even though I saw it, right, I'm kind of on their side, because I'm like, yeah, this does all sound like a bunch of nonsense. And
well, there's no proof of it.
Well, there's one little segment.
There is one at the end, but like there's one little tidbit. But from what everyone is shown and what everyone has seen, and heard and seen for themselves, it just went straight through.
The big problem with this is not only is it, to me anyway, is not only is it so specifically created a scenario that's so one-to-one with the idea of like someone who feels that they've been touched by God or has an experience like that, is that there's so many moments in this where like they'll bring up Occam's razor, or they'll bring up something else, and she'll turn and look at Matthew McConaughey, and it's like this moment where like the movie's like beating you over the head, where she's realizing in this moment she's realizing that she's good to, like,
yeah, but it's
learning
not
this lesson.
Okay, but it's not an acceptance of, well, they're also right. That's not it. It's just that some things require a leap of faith, and which is exactly what she has to take.
I can see that, but I'm not really complaining. I'm not complaining. You're assuming that's what I thought. I'm not. I'm saying the moment's too cheesy and sentimental, and
okay.
I don't think it works. It takes me out of the movie. Like, I'm seeing the movie's gears moving and trying to manipulate me into a feeling, and more importantly, it's trying to manipulate me into a feeling where I accept something that, if you asked me before this movie, do I think the idea of believing in a God on some level is delusional, right? And I don't mean that sound harsh. If you religiously believe in God, I don't want to make it sound like I'm making fun of you or anything like that. But on some level, I think it's just silly nonsense, right? That's just how I feel about it. And nothing in this movie, right? Because here's the thing. Her experience is little evidence as there may be for it, right? And I would be skeptical too. Right? Although the 18 hours of static that was recorded that matches up with her time scale is interesting, certainly. Is that her moment took trillions of dollars, the entire, like, multiple countries and civilizations on Earth coming together, united, to build this thing from a message that came from space. It took all of that to give her this experience. So on some level, all this effort went into it. Right? There's a gargantuan build-up to this thing happening. So, I would be skeptical, and like, you know what? You had this weird drop through this big machine, and you passed out. Like, you could have just had some weird hallucination, and that's the end of it. Totally could be that. At the very least, there was like this unsurmountable circumstance leading up to what this moment was, what produced this moment for you. Whereas, like, did Matthew McConaughey say specifically what caused his experience, his moment of, like, being touched by God? Did he specify that? I can't remember.
I can't recall.
Yeah, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it was smaller scale than, Eleanor's thing, right? Her whole big... do I know what I think I fundamentally, like, the message of this movie, regardless of my feelings on, like, specific religion and God, it doesn't just connect with me. And obviously I am, making a lot of statements here about the cheesiness and the sentimentality and all that I don't like, but I think fundamentally it's not just that I don't believe in some of these things, is that I don't necessarily think I care or want comfort by knowing that there's something else out there. I believe the term is absurdist, which is just like the looking for meaning is pointless. It doesn't matter. And that sounds really cynical, and it's not though. Like,
a little bit.
No, it's not though. Let me make this clear. I'm not saying there's not value in life that we have. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that life has as much meaning as we give it. What we do, what we choose to do, what we make of life is what's important about it. And it's the same philosophy I have with storytelling, right? When a movie's good or a TV show is good, it's good because someone orchestrated it and gave things that, because they're all fictional characters, all of it didn't happen, all of it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but SETI is a real thing.
But you give it meaning. And what's your point?
Do you think it's a waste of time?
Well, no, because it's interesting, but I don't need I don't need it for, like, affirming existence. I don't need it to know why we're here. Like, it's cool because, like, space is cool, aliens are cool, and it's interesting to think about. But I don't need it to know that we're not alone. Like,
but you see why it's important to Ellie, because, like, in the when she's a kid. She's building a radio, or she's trying to reach further and further. She asked her dad, "Can we talk to Mom?" And he says, "There's no telescope or radioscope big enough to do that." So, or antenna, I should say. And then, she's still searching. And, she hates, her dad dies. She's alone. Matthew McConaughey calls it out. She leaves him and becomes alone again. She's focused on she's focused on reaching through science only to find out whether or not she's alone. So, I mean, it's important to her character throughout the whole thing. It doesn't have to represent more than that for it to be, like, important in the film.
I know, I'm just trying to explain why philosophically I fundamentally kind of disagree with the... Because the movie presents it in a way where this represents all of humanity, and this like everyone cares about this, and at the end we see that there's people who believe her story, and there's, like, people with signs and, like, oh, she's been touched by alien gods or something, and, like, bless us, Ellie,
right,
or something, like,
right.
So
it's meant to mirror earlier when she was getting the opposite signs of, like, well, the religion will reject this. And the chaos that was happening on the way to, like, the very large array telescopes.
I think the other problem as well is there's a lot of elements to, like, everything that Alien Dad says that feels very, like, just token. Like, every time we meet a nice enough alien, like a wise alien in a movie, it's always, you humans are capable of really awful things, but also much love, which makes you interested. Like, it felt like a 101 of, like, what an alien like this would say.
That's the point, though, right? Because this is the first step, he says. This is the first step that humanity will take, because you're not ready. You're not ready for more than that. And maybe you'll be ready when people believe your story and people, want to come back. But he said, like, this is not... She's like, well, you built this and brought us here. He's like, we didn't build it. Like, we were brought here also. The people who built this were aren't around anymore. They're gone. And... like, we don't really know why, other than just to let each other know that we're not alone out in space. So, like, it's... It just all sounds so sentimental. And a lot of these ideas I've seen done better in other things. The idea of ancient technology from aliens that is used in other ways. Or, like...
I don't know. It's all just a bit.
You don't think there's something nice about having a universal question that's out there for everyone? Like, even other aliens asked at one point, "Are we alone?" and searched to find the answer. I mean, her question when she's asked in the committee, like, what are you going to ask when you meet them? She says, I'm going to ask them how they got through this age of technology without killing themselves.
Yeah, that's a much more interesting question, but that's not what the movie gets at.
Right, because that's not the point of their visit. I mean, when she gets there, she's not really there to ask those kind of questions, or he's not there to answer them, I should say, if he even is a he.
Yeah, I think
this is just the answer to "Are we alone?"
I think philosophically, I just don't care what this movie's talking about, right? Like, there's a lot.
You're disappointing Carl Sagan right now.
Well, no, I like it. That's the thing. I like a lot of what Carl Sagan talks about, right? But
this was a big deal to him, not just like the book, obviously, but like when is it the Voyager 2 that's got like the whole, this is what humans are, this is where we live, here's some of our music, and like that's out there. Just in space, just in case someone's there and they pick it up one day.
Yeah, and that's about reaching out, but that is not the same thing as like needing to have meaning. Like we only have meaning if there's something else out there, so that we're not alone.
I think it's a reminder that we are precious. That that's the big vastness of the universe can make us feel insignificant sometimes, and it's just. But this is a reminder that we are special, and we are.
The strength in that, though, the strength that if we can do this on our own, that is uplifting in and of itself. Like this movie places such a value on something that comes from this really mushy thing. Which, by the way, the dad's death scene in the flashback is laughable, right? The slow motion of her running to get the pills in the bathroom.
You don't like that it ends up being the reverse mirror the whole time?
I mean, that's fine, but it was just more like she almost looks like she's running in place in slow motion, right? It had like this weird look. Maybe it's because it's just through a reflection. That's why it looks kind of, weird rather than normal. But it just looked really weird and goofy to me.
Because she's reflecting on her past.
That makes me roll my eyes. The way you said that.
Oh yeah, okay. I sat through your reflection lecture in the movie. What was it? Unbreakable?
Oh, the reflection stuff and that's amazing.
Okay, but not in this. And this is dumb.
And this is cheesy Hollywood nonsense. I think, like, even from the start, the whole, like, I want to talk to my dead mom just comes off to me as sentimental, right?
She's like 12, or I guess she's like 9 years old.
I'm not critiquing that a 9-year-old would say this. I'm critiquing as a movie as a whole. It's built upon this premise of wanting to talk to someone to know that they're out there. And I'm not saying that there's not a version of this story that could work better for me, because I think there absolutely is. And there's definitely stories about getting signals from space that I think are vastly more interesting to me. Like, I am far more interested in treating it like a mystery and like I loved Vast the Night, for example, right? Which is a better movie than Contact. I'm just going to say it right now.
Oh my God, you cannot be serious right now. Okay, that's it.
I am definitely serious. Oh,
God damn it.
I just... I think the two leads have decent enough chemistry, but I do think some of the dialogue is really forced, especially when they start debating their philosophies. I don't know. I don't really want from me. Like, I
like the relationship. Like, I like the conflicts that they both have because of their beliefs, and that they want to be together, but like there are other things that are causing them to be apart. She's putting her career first, and that's just the type of character she is. She's separating herself from any kind of attachment to something that will set her back, even if that is like maybe she just doesn't believe that anything can work because he's a man of God. Like once she finds out about that changes the flirting. Everything kind of stops at some point, and then she's like, well, it'll just be a fling, and then that'll be it. but she does feel
Alright,
an attachment to him.
To be fair, she finds out the whole man of God thing before the one night stand. I want to make that clear based on what you just said.
Well, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that she's like, they're flirting and stuff. And then like someone calls him like a pastor or father or something like that. And she's like, wait, what? You're talking to me about science. And now I have to like deal with, now I have to like try to still respect you.
Mm. Honestly, I actually think the far more interesting story in this movie that I get way more engaged in, other than just the cool mystery of what is the signal and all that, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but is actually her being looked down upon, being left out of meetings, like Tom Skerritt taking her glory, like the more feminist struggle that she has in the film, where she's
that
constantly
is
undermined.
definitely the big thing in Carl Sagan's novelization, or I mean, it's his book.
Because to me that felt more like a story that I could understand, and I don't know if I say relate to. I'm not saying I relate to being in that position necessarily, but
You're more sympathetic too, though.
like, I understand this, and I felt like there was a clear story here being told where no, she should be the one to go through, and like there's always this thing like the first of a lot of things, like so many things in history. First man on the moon, yeah, first man on the moon. Where's the first woman on the moon? Have we even had one yet?
Nope.
No, we haven't. Like, the first person to do something absolutely should and could be her if she's the one who actually believed in all this. And it's frustrating. Tom Skerritt gets a little bit villainous when he starts taking credit and like sort of appointing himself as the leader of this investigation, when it's like, you wanted to shut her down. She believed in this. She wanted to keep looking for signals, and she eventually found one.
She had to go fight for it too. She had to go find funding on her own because he pulled out funding.
Yeah.
And because I mean, as soon as he shows up in like that Jurassic Park Jeep over at Arecibo in Puerto Rico, he's like, I hate being here. I miss my desk job. This is a waste of time. And like right away you're like, okay, we hate this guy because he doesn't have any kind of faith in what she's doing. And yes, I use that word on purpose.
Yeah, I have no problem with faith. Like, I love, like, what's an example? Like, Signs. Let's take Signs, right? I know it's an M. Night Shyamalan movie. I'm playing with fire here, going with M. Night Shyamalan. But Signs, that whole movie's, like, main character, unfortunately, Mel Gibson is the one who's played him, but, like, that whole movie's main character is this guy who used to be a priest and gave up because of something, tragic happened to his wife. And by the end of the story, he regains his faith, and that story completely works for me as a character arc, because it's not really necessarily about what he believes in specifically. It's about believing in what he believed in again. It's about him becoming himself again. And like, I can get totally on board with stories like that. I think for me, just a lot of the comparisons and the parallels that it's trying to draw between science and religion in this movie, I don't think I'll really get. Some of it I do. So some of it I get the comparison, but the way it sort of tries to talk about science being this like philosophical thing to everyone who cares about science, or to everyone who looks at science to explain things, like, I don't know, it doesn't track for me in a lot of ways. So in fact, one of the characters that I like seeing John Hurt, but I kind of hated his character in this. He felt like this weird Deus Ex Machina character who just came out of nowhere, just to kind of like fix the plot every time like she would be thrown away from it. It's like, oh no, we'll make sure you get your fund. Oh no, we'll make sure, come to my private plane and I'll make sure you get access to this thing. And
but we this is still like, although this movie has some fantastical elements, this is still the real world where some people have done really well with money and they tend to be quite eccentric. And if you want to get things done, like, they're the ones that you have to ask money for. And like, it would make sense that it would be an eccentric billionaire. It'd be like, yeah, I'll go ahead and build it.
Yeah, and if it made more of a statement about him and his wealth and his position in the world, maybe I could have gotten more into that. But as it is, he just felt like a quirky character who's there to solve all the movie's plot holes. If that makes sense. The most interesting thing anyone ever says about him in this whole movie is at the end, when it's like, hey, what if this was a hoax? What if this was him with his money just faking this signal from this part of the galaxy? And like, someone's like, maybe he's got the money, maybe this is some. And you know, he's already died at that point in the movie, so it's like, oh, well, we can never ask him. We can never just like make him admit if he did something like that.
Yeah, part of me was wondering if he was supposed to represent like I guess Eleanor kind of represents Carl Sagan. Like she even at one point wears, like when she's making the pitch, she's wearing like his suit. Like he wears the light turtlenecks with the beige suits. That was like his thing. And she's definitely wearing a Carl Sagan suit in that meeting. But part of me was also like, because, you know, he dies at the end and Carl died during the production of this film. And he represents like, well, we do hope to find out what's out there one day. We got to be listening, even if there's nothing, like we have to listen. And so like, I was wondering like maybe he was supposed to represent a little bit of Carl's hopefulness and otherworldliness in a way. I mean, he definitely wasn't that kind of, you know, he wasn't a billionaire.
Yeah. And
he just like gave people inspiration, you know, through his Cosmos series and through all the TV appearances he did. Like he was just this face of science and this particular field of science that gave people inspiration.
Yeah. You know, I enjoyed like the listening to the radio signals. I enjoyed like finally hearing something, the race back to the base to like try and catch it before it went away. And I love like honestly my favorite moment in the whole movie is when they realize there's a video image in the signal, and they sort of like get it, and it's kind of they have to like stretch it and put it in. It's because it's they're too zoomed in, so they have to like sort of, and you sort of gradually see a swastika appearing, and you like the WTF at this moment is like really good. And I love
that like she asked James Woods to send his like guards out because they're like military guys holding like AKs or whatever they have. And like at that moment, he just like calls them back in. Like suddenly there's danger.
My favorite part though is the way he sort of first reacts. Though as soon as he realizes that it's an image of Hitler, he just like goes, "Yeah, all right." So the way he turns and just says, "Yeah, all right, okay, now we're doing it my way." What I thought was weird. I mean, I guess they could easily disprove this, and that's why the movie doesn't do it. But I really thought like some of the cynics were going to say, "Well, clearly this is just like our own signal bouncing back at us, then, or something," you know, because it's like it's fully from us. Like this is from Earth.
Yeah.
I did like the like, oh no, the reason why this is the one that was sent back is this was the first TV signal that was strong enough to actually leave Earth,
break that barrier. Yeah.
What sounds, you know, time period. I'm sure they researched it, but it sounds about right.
Yeah, Vega is like 26 light years or something. They said so. Like it would take 26 years for that, and then another 26 to come back, saying we heard you, and now we're sending the signal with it.
So that like sort of mystery and what's in there, and I you know, I guess the actual raw science fiction of the message and where did it come from and the mystery of it is far more interesting to me than the more theological debate that, you know, comes up as the movie goes on. And because Matthew McConaughey's character kind of feels like he's just a conduit for that, as opposed to being like a full-fledged character on his own, you know, it made him feel a little hollow to me as a character. I think that was maybe one of the problems I had with him, is that it felt like he was there to like give these ideas but not necessarily be all that interested on his own. Does that
I
make
was
sense?
a little confused as to why McConaughey was always invited to everything, like was always in the room with the president and all that stuff. But I guess he represented a group of people. But maybe he had a position in the White House that I just was not aware of, or on the science team.
Speaking of characters I hate in this, Rob Lowe's character, who's like the ultra...
He's there for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, but he's like the ultra conservative guy who's like, oh no, we shouldn't look into this because this is like a challenge to like Christian stuff.
Yeah, he's the Fox News pundit.
Someone punch him, please. Someone punch him, like right now.
He's very punchable in this. He looks the same though.
And I'm not saying that as a movie critique. I'm just saying, like, you know, they succeeded in making me want to strangle him like instantly.
Yeah, I think this is definitely like one of the highlight of the film. Also, is just decoding the signal. Like when she gets the signal to when they're decoding everything, and the mystery of what it means and what's in it, and then also the scene where she travels. I think that's also a highlight. Just, you know, the adventure of going on that journey.
Yeah. I think, and it's not even like when I say I'd prefer a more cerebral version of this. Like, I'm not saying like change the character arc. Like the character arc being someone who's like obsessed and like stays alone because she feels alone and has to learn that she isn't. Like I think that character arc is like at like its raw value is perfectly fine. I don't know if I love the idea. Like I like the idea of her learning to value. Like I love well, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I really remember liking Into the Woods, the film that was based on the real guy who went exploring and he sort of went off the grid.
You mean the Bill Bryson one?
What? No. Well, maybe that was a character's name. I can't remember. But
okay.
Amelia Hirsch
never mind.
was the
Yeah.
character.
I know.
Or the actor, right? I think it was what's his
the Bill
name?
Bryson one does have Nick Nolte in it.
Sean Penn directed it. I was trying to think of like what. I knew it was an actor who directed it. I was like, right.
I haven't seen it, but I'm very familiar with it.
And that movie has this really like thing where by the end of the film, his arc is that he went out to find happiness, but ultimately he realized that by the end that I don't know if this was like I don't know how accurate to like the real events like the ending was.
Yeah, it's a true story. So he died.
But in the movie there's like sort of nice like sentiment at the end of like something he realized by the end, and I think the idea of like going through this experience making her value the people around her, and because if anything the more heartwarming relationship to me in this movie was her and Ken. Like she was delighted that he showed up, and because he they went to go to the New Mexico satellites for a while themselves, and then after it skips 4 years and like the funding's drying up and the government wanting the time with the satellites back, and he's like, look, we have to accept this is over, just grow up early, we're done. But then when she finds something, it's kind of heartwarming when he comes back and he wants to listen, and he's a blind man
and he's helpful.
Yeah, and he listens to, so you can hear things a little bit better, and he's helping her decode, and it feels like a sort of genuine, sweet relationship that felt much more heartwarming to me than anything she had with McConaughey. And you can tell a story where she realizes to value the people around her, and because she's so willing to, like, she might never come back. This might be a one-way trip, or at the very least, if she does come back, they explain the whole theory of relativity, and this might mean she comes back and everyone she knows is dead, or at the very least, they're all on death's door. They're all going to be elderly, if not nothing else. And she's willing to do it, and obviously there's a lot of good reasons why she still might want to do it anyway, but obviously it's part of her character flaw that she is maybe not valuing like her surroundings as much. She's sort of making that decision a bit more rash than other people might. And you can have that be like the character arc that she learns to value those around her, and like the experience does that to her. But this movie kind of like tries to wrap it up in like sort of neat bow, which is she needs to be told by what effectively feels like a higher power that she's not alone, right? That's what the aliens kind of represent, and it feels a little too one-to-one with the God stuff. And I think if this comparison to religion was a bit more subtle, I might actually quite like it. I might like a subtle version of this.
Well, I mean, we haven't talked about it yet, but Jake Busey in this, I think, represents how she sees religion throughout the beginning of the film and through most of the film until the end. Like when she gets the signal and it's out there and everybody's like starting to talk about it and build it, and the opposition is the religion. People are there to say that this is not from God, that you shouldn't like explore this. And I think even the imagery of Jake Busey kind of having like a Jesus look, but being very, very white is on purpose also. Like he is this like bastardized version of the American evangelicals who are like, are taking religion and weaponizing it literally in this film. So I mean, we haven't really talked about it. I know you say you don't like him. I assume it's just because
he's just so
he's
goofy.
got that Busey face.
He's just so she does. It happens a couple of times where she's driving past them. It's once at when they're all picketing outside the satellites. It's once when she's going to the gala. But like, there's just a couple of times where they'll drive past them and he'll just stare at her, and it's just this goofy, derpy Jake Busey face, like staring at her. So when he turns out to be a terrorist who snuck in with like a suicide vest, it's like there's kind of like a moment I'm like, That's what he was building up. Like, like I don't know. It caught me off guard. Okay.
Well, I mean, he's very recognizable. So when she sees him on the monitor, it makes sense that she would know, hey, that guy's not supposed to be there.
Don't get me wrong. I accept that. Like, I believe that she would remember his face because he's Jake Busey.
Yeah. You can't hide with a new haircut.
I believe she would remember him. I'm not critiquing that at all.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, geez. It's funny because obviously we got so murky into the actual debate of the movie. You know, we've not kind of went through the plot in quite the same way. We mentioned talking about the decoding.
That's okay.
Things.
I think we went through the plot in the sort of in the non-spoiler section.
So, well, some movies just like lend themselves to different types of discussion. Where sometimes you want to talk about mechanics, you want to talk about specific moments and how the filmmaking achieves like certain things, and I think with this one, it ultimately comes down to the debate that the two characters are kind of battling with and what her character arc is. You know, because we can talk about the fact that, okay, so the suicide bomb takes out the big device, and it explodes, and it's kind of like a shuttle launch, but it obviously looks very different because it's like one of those what do you call those like old things from the 80s that's spinning circles that you'd get? It's like a desk ornament. So one of those.
Yeah, I don't know the name for it.
You know what I'm talking about though.
Yeah, it's a really cool design.
Yeah, so that blows up, and it's like, oh no, everyone's. But then of course, Deus Ex Machina man, John Hurt shows up, and he's like, don't worry,
we're building another one in Japan.
There's another one. Yes, go out, and it's on the water, so we get to have like wacky, like, you know, because the control center this time is going to be on a ship, so like the ship's like moving towards it and being sucked in with like the gravitational pull. And what's so weird about this is like the argument that this could have been a hoax. I'm like, you know, this thing, like, even if you don't believe it's sent her somewhere through a wormhole and sent her back in, you know, the blink of an eye, like, if you don't believe that, fair enough, but this thing was doing insane things in terms of energy that no human technology has ever done. So, like, if you're accusing this guy of like designing this, then you're saying he was doing some insane shit that like no one's ever, you know, gotten close to, because it is like pulling the ship in, like the amount of energy, the effect it's having, the way it's like it functions. Like, if you're saying
and
this,
it's like a mile away from it too.
Yeah, if you're saying this is a hoax, you're saying that a human being was able to design this thing and like plant this mystery. And okay, fair enough. Let's go off and say, but the argument that this is the simplest explanation, I'm like, maybe it's simpler than her getting beamed across the universe, but I don't know if it's simple.
I think also, I mean, James Woods' character represents like just the government in general.
Yes.
And like he has been opposed from the very beginning to this. He like shows up saying like, this is a threat. Everything about this is wrong. We should like, we should like, the humanity is not ready for war with aliens. So I think even though like, yeah, he's saying, well, this could be just a hoax, I think he needs it to be a hoax. Like he needs to believe it, and he needs the people to believe that it was a hoax. So even if like, he's like, even if it's a hoax, like it's a pretty amazing technology that was piece of technology that was built for this hoax. Like he doesn't care. The point is that he needs the people of Earth to not take this seriously. And I think that's represented also by the fact that, you know, at the very end, Angela Bassett says, well, you know, there is 18 hours of static that she recorded the whole time in that split second. And he goes, that's interesting. But like when we see a flash forward of her like talking to kids about what's out there, it seems to be that nobody has gotten that fast.
Oh, that's
so
top secret,
they are like purposely, like they don't want this to be out there. They want people to think it's a hoax.
You're right. He's got a motive in what he's saying. He's got all these reasons to say what he's saying. Like, you know, you're absolutely right about like why he's saying these things. You know, beyond whatever his beliefs are. Like, you're right. I think it's this frustrating thing where you kind of like get to a point at the end of the movie where, you know, I don't necessarily like the point that it's trying to make necessarily. I really don't like the sappiness of like, you know, like McConaughey being there and looking at each other, and then when they go out to the car at the end and he sort of gets asked by a reporter, like, you know, what do you think? As a man of the cloth, like, what do you think? He's like, well, you know, we're both looking for the same things, and I, for one, believe her. And it's almost like, you know, he's extending the hand, because, you know, she wouldn't believe him earlier on in the film, but now he's willing to believe her. You know.
Well, she takes his hand when he says it, and I think it's...
Yeah.
I don't think this is like her conversion to Christianity.
Oh, no. I never mean to imply that.
Like,
I made that clear. I never mean to imply that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, okay. I do think that this is very much like they just understand each other. And like before, she saw religion as the Gary Buseys out there with all the signs. And then when she leaves, she sees all the people who believe her, who believe in the science and are taking this leap of faith for her and saying like, and they have all the signs now. And it's just very much like, yeah, it's the same thing.
You say that as if these people who are just assuming that all this is true aren't also just kind of nut jobs for showing up with signs and saying, we believe you, the aliens are coming.
Well, no, I don't think it's like that. It's just like they're on her side, you know, like she is somebody who like said in front of the whole world that she doesn't believe in God. She doesn't believe in miracles, but yet she's experienced this thing. So she has this like credibility. So people who like want to believe that something else is out there have something, they have their Messiah.
I have 2 points here I want to make on this. One's in the movie and one's kind of an external thing, right? I want to make it clear that because you said a couple of times that, you know, she sees religious people as the Gary Busey, or sorry, the Jake Buseys.
I think she does in the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to make it clear that just because I don't like because I'm an atheist and because I think religion as an idea is silly, I don't view everyone who is religious as being extreme or as not being level-headed members of society who are quite nice to be around, or dare I say, a pleasure to be around. Lots of nice religious people, right? Let me make that very clear. Just don't talk to me about religion. Leave it off the table. But you know, perfectly reasonable people out there. And I think I just want to make that clear based on that point. just in case people thought I was thinking everyone was Jake Busey out there. But anyway, the other point though, which I have now forgotten, that it was more relevant to the movie, annoyingly. Oh yes, that's what it was. Right. So earlier in the movie, when they're doing the candidates and picking who's going to be on, and Matthew McConaughey's found his way onto the judges panel of who's going to be picked to go on this mission, and Tom Skerritt's put his name in the running, the sleazeball that he is, and she's at this interview where they're asking these questions, and they're about to wrap up, and Matthew McConaughey jumps in and goes, I have one more question. Do you believe in God? Right? It leads up to it a bit more, but that's ultimately what he asks. Do you believe in God? And,
are you a spiritual person?
Yeah.
He says, yeah.
And but it becomes, do you believe in God? You know, they get more specific by the end of the scene. And she says, I don't see how this is relevant. And I think what kind of frustrates me a little bit on a personal level about this, obviously it's very frustrating to watch if you're an atheist because you don't believe this should matter. But I think is that I never related more to her in this movie than when she says that, what the hell does that have to do with this? It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the guys like, well, 95% of people believe in, you know, a higher being of some sort, so it is kind of relevant if you're representing humanity. And of course, my joking first thought is, yeah, let's be a bunch of a laughing stock to the aliens and show up with like all these stories of God and Jeebus. But that moment, right, in her frustration that she was honest, despite the fact of the consequences, because like so many people are religious, and saying that she doesn't believe in God, and she's not going to lie and say she does. And then Tom Skerritt, you know, we find out afterwards, like immediately says, "Oh yes," like he keeps dropping it, and he's like, it's almost like he's watched her interview and went, "Oh no, I need to mention God like as much as possible. Oh, I'm a God-loving man, and oh, blah blah blah. Like this is important. Like our faith has to be talked about, and an important part of who we are. Yada yada." And it's like this manipulation, and that's what loses her the job, right? Is that moment is so relatable. And I want, at least for me anyway, that she is so frustrated that they even like see this as a factor. That when she goes through her change and her experience, I don't think I go through it with her. So at the end, when she does have this challenge presented to her of like not having this thing that she can say, and saying, no, I can't withdraw my statement because I felt it, I experienced it, I went through it. Like to me, the more interesting thing was the Star Trek Next Generation ending to this almost was her saying, "I accept that you can't believe me. I know you can't. Like I wouldn't believe me either. But I'm going to keep studying this. I'm going to keep going down this path. But I have to accept that you're not going to believe me." Right? That to me was the truer ending of this, because she is a scientist and because of the way she does think. But it kind of went for more, oh, now she understands Matthew McConaughey's, like, you know, views a bit better. Like, she understands his beliefs in a way. And I think that disconnect where I've really related to her at one point in the story, and then by the and maybe it's because of the falsehood of the over sentimentality of the dead dad talking to her, and it all being, you're not alone in the universe, and so on. But it falls a bit flat for me. Ultimately, what I'm saying is it falls a bit flat.
I love that scene when she's there and they ask that question.
Oh, it's a well-directed scene and a well-performed scene, for sure.
Immediately, she gets emotional because she knows she's lost. As soon as they ask that question, she knows that she's lost, because it is important to people. And we know it is, because we would, I mean, maybe it'll change, but every presidential candidate has to talk about God or they won't get elected. They can't, because the president is supposed to represent the country. And if they come out and say they're atheist, people won't elect him. And it's the same here. This is what that represents. Yeah. I mean, this is still very much an American is going on behalf of Earth, because it's an American film. So this is still very much the problems of America and of humanity right now. And she was right. Like she was truthful up there, and someone else lied and they got the position. And it was a man, someone that people look to and immediately trust, even though they're lying to them.
She should just lied. I think her response to this should have been like, "Do you believe in God?" It's like, "Oh yeah."
She danced around it. She didn't even really say it. She said, "I believe I've already answered that question."
Let me finish my joke. God damn it! I wanted to make a joke.
I didn't know you were making a joke.
And you jumped in with a serious, like, just. Sorry, the moment's passed. I was going to make a whole joke where she's like, "Yeah, I love Big G. You know, me and Big G were tight." Like, you know, just like do a whole joke bit where she's lying about caring about God. Well, it would have been funny, all right? But you jumped in with like I'm trying to debate something, and I'm not. I'm trying to bring the tone here back to a nice, pleasant, jovial podcast again.
I love this movie.
It's okay.
I honestly, like, I think every scene is, and every line of dialogue matters. I think every scene is so well crafted. I think the visuals are amazing. Like the scene where she's walking into the pod, essentially, it's like she's walking a plank. Like it's so representative of her dying. And like she's even like got this imagery of like the two people walking behind her and they stop. So like she has to walk the plank alone. And then she gets strapped into a chair and plugged in. It looks like an electric chair. And like and then it seals off, like the door closed, like this giant vault door closes and then it seals off. You can see it like there's some sort of alien technology that's causing it to be seamless. And that is, so there's no door anymore. And it feels very much like a tomb. I think that whole scene is so beautifully done. When you see like the big rings move beneath her, it's like she's falling into like this monster almost, like they look like tentacles. It's and then like, yeah, she goes through, you know, she sees the white light, and I think this movie is so special. Like I love this film, and obviously it's a very personal film, and I've been here defending it a lot, but I think this is one of my best reviews because I have a lot to say about it, and I think I don't know, like I know I stand alone on this mountain, and you are not alone on yours. Like there's a lot of people who side with you, but I really truly love every decision made in this film.
If you feel I have impaired your critique and analysis and raving, then feel free to take more time, because I, like, by all means, go for it. I just think it's over sentimental. I think philosophically it's a bit too preachy. and a bit too hammy for me to really ever truly. And it's not that you can have a little bit of sentiment, right? And because the whole being humbled by the size of the universe and kind of realizing how small you are, I don't think that necessarily has to equate to a religious experience. I think that's the default comparison to make, and I don't necessarily think it is. Like the one that everyone feels, or that characters or people who look to science versus religion look at it as this like divine thing. It's
no, but it provides answers, whereas some people get it from another source.
Well, I don't think it says it's always about answers, though, necessarily. It's about having solutions to things. It's about having better ways of doing things. I don't necessarily think it's about answers all the time.
Yeah, well, okay, but like science provides some sort of comfort that there is structure in the universe. We like patterns. We like things that make sense, and I think that science, and particularly astronomy, can like provide a lot of comfort for people who don't have things like religion.
I don't think everyone who doesn't have religion needs comfort. Like this is the false part that I can't agree with. I don't think everyone needs that.
You don't think it's there subconsciously for you?
No.
I don't know, Peter. I think you might be an outlier.
What life? We don't need an answer. We don't need a purpose.
I don't think we need. Yeah, I don't think we need that either. But I think there is some sort of comfort that comes from knowing that, the world makes sense. The universe makes sense. We have some sort of.
It doesn't make sense though.
I mean, like, just studying things on a molecular scale, so we can explain why something has happened, like scientifically, rather than like, well, what was that big ball of, of fire in the sky? And people would say, oh, it's a weather balloon, or it's a small meteor that has come. But like it's we don't have to say, oh no, it's Apollo shooting an arrow of fire across the sky, or whatever. God sent an angel into hell, so it's burning its wings off on the way.
I would rather
I don't know.
No, I would rather know what it is. This is like a weird way of looking at this to me. It's not about comfort. It's like we understand things better, so we can use everything better, so we can make more of what we do have. Like I don't necessarily think that understanding how the universe works, or what other planets are, or like what stars are and distant galaxies. I don't think that's about
I'm using
comfort.
that as an example, but I don't think is limited at that. I'm just saying, like, the overall like study of science is comforting. I mean, I'm comforted when I go to a doctor and they're not throwing leeches on me or telling me that the reason I have like pain in my stomach is because there's an invisible toad living in there.
I'm comforted by that, but that doesn't mean like I just think this is a weird lens to look at it through. It's not about being comforted. It's practical. It's got a use. It's got a purpose. Life is better because we understand things.
That's also true.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, comfort's just a really weird word to use to me, to describe.
Well, I mean, in the context of how science is being used in this film versus religion.
Yeah. Which I guess that's the problem, is that this is almost like science viewed through the lens of what religion means to a religious person. And I don't necessarily think that science does mean that to someone who isn't religious. Like it's there. Science is just like language or math.
This neutral thing. Yeah.
It's something that makes sense, that has functions, that has numbers. It's something that can be understood and used by us to do things, to save people, to
right,
whatever.
But you do realize that there's long history, especially in America, of like science being opposed to religion, and religion like declaring wars over it, like mini wars, like civil wars. That's the wrong word. Like civil discrepancies.
Yes, but are the scientists declaring war on religion?
I would say no, but like definitely religion
Which is the point.
Opposing science.
Yeah, but that's the point. The religious side are the ones who are like, oh no, you're challenging our thoughts and beliefs that give us comfort, so we are going to battle against this. And let me just get a little bit cynical here for a second. I say, our thoughts and beliefs that give us comfort. In a lot of cases, it's our thoughts and beliefs that give us power, because we can abuse it, because we've built some structure around it.
Well, yeah, I think that's always going to be there, but they're also like the majority. So wherever there's going to be the majority, they have the power.
I mean, this is a philosophical debate, but I think this is partially my problem, is I don't necessarily think that this should be a philosophical question. But I don't know, like, whatever.
Well, I mean, I think that, we have a unique perspective, and we
atheists.
identify because we're two atheists. Yeah. And I think when this movie was released to the masses, like, this is a much easier way to approach it. But like, I don't think that, like, obviously as an atheist, it's easy to just dismiss religion, which I do. Like, I don't believe in God, and I do think religions are dangerous, like a lot of the time, except for maybe Buddhism. I don't think Buddhism is dangerous.
No, I agree. I agree. Religion is
and
can
it
be
has
dangerous.
been abused. It has been used for power, like you said, to be the cynical side. But I still think that it's a nice message, and it's a message of unity, and of understanding that is the world we live in.
What, you mean like a much better?
Eleanor,
you mean like a much better film, like Arrival, perhaps?
Well, I think Arrival takes a lot from Contact, for sure, and I think that Eleanor at the end of the film has not been converted to religion because she's had this experience that is very much like a religious experience. She's just more understanding, and I think also her boyfriend is more understanding of her. Like, they've been opposed, butting heads and other things throughout the film, and at this moment they understand each other, and they can live in unity because they have this shared thing. I think it's pretty nice.
It falls flat for me. Like, that's basically all. Like, ultimately, like, we've done a lot of waffling about it, and we've done a lot of talking about our thoughts and feelings, and like you said earlier, I don't like using the word beliefs. I don't necessarily think what I think is a belief. I just think it is what it is.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, but any scientist will say that, there's always room for change.
Oh, for sure. I mean, science ultimately is like, once you think you've got something, you spend all of your time try to prove it wrong, because that's what makes it true. Is you prove it.
Well, yeah, and then new things come in, and we got to scrap it and start over.
Some people say, oh, it's funny how this keeps changing. Like, well, that's how science works.
That's the beauty of it, yeah.
Yeah, people keep examining, people keep digging deeper, and we keep understanding better and better. It's just how it works. And it's methodical, and it is what it is.
It's comforting.
No. I don't find science not like that. Not on like a spiritual level where I'm happy I'm not alone. It's comforting in that, we understand things better, so we now have, like, say, a vaccine for a pandemic. That's comforting. Like, that's a comforting thing, but it's not comforting on a spiritual level.
Yeah.
I was going to use a generic, just like, we've got a cure for a disease. I thought, oh no, wait, I've got a really good example. As it happens, there's like something going on that I can directly compare. But yes, there's comfort sort of in the end results of a lot of science, for sure. Like, it's comforting that we can take a plane to the other side of the planet instead of having to swim. Like, that's comforting. That's practical. It's handy. It's useful. It connects the world.
It's a lot of pollution, though.
Yes, and there's drawbacks, and then ultimately we hope for better solutions that have less drawbacks, and we try and get, evolving. There's always evolving, and there's the exception of evolving. And do you know what the funny thing about religion is that, like, it has to evolve, but it's very resistant to evolving.
It eventually does, though.
It eventually has to, because enough science gets in the way and it has to
They gotta
evolve.
move the goalpost, yeah.
The goalposts have got to move. And look, I don't know why. Like, if religion brings you comfort, if you need that in your life, if it's a coping mechanism, whatever. I am not perfect. I have a lot of weird thought processes. But if there's one thing that is true about me, is that I just don't think about things that way. I never have. And I don't.
I guess that's what makes me perfect.
Is I don't need some comfort from beyond or some idea that we're more important than what we are. We're as important as we make ourselves. And for the record, like, I do believe that it is important to keep looking for alien life and examining more planets. If nothing else, like, materials, minerals, things like that we might get from other planets could be very important for certain things in the future. One day we may have to evacuate to Mars. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah, but there's no air there.
Terraforming, baby, terraforming. So there's all.
Give these people air.
So there's a lot of practical reasons for doing it, but kind of like Eleanor says in the movie, that I agree with. I'm all for faith in certain things. When I talk about faith, usually it tends to be less about a theology thing and more faith in a person. I love any story where a character believes in another character and then is rewarded for believing in that character. That is so uplifting to me, because I think enough people in real life let you down, and you want to believe in people, and the fantasy of a lot of good storytelling is no, sometimes someone will pull through and be the person you need them to be or believe them to be. And that, so the word faith for me is not faith is a great thing. Faith is a story mechanic. Faith is something to be rewarded in people. And ideology is a great thing. I don't know where I was going with the previous point. I've forgotten now because I went on a tangent about faith.
Well, it reminded me of something. Go ahead if you're not finished.
Well, I wasn't, but I'd forgotten where I was going to go with it. So you feel free, jump in.
Well, it just reminded me of the scene of when she comes back, and the next time we see her after, she's like, "What happened? How long was I gone?"
Oh.
She's basically in a straitjacket. I don't know if she's in a straitjacket or if it's just the imagery of a straitjacket, so it's meant to look like it. She's got no makeup. Her hair's all frizzy. She's got bandages.
I think
people are talking about her being hysterical and having episodes. They use the word.
It's just I think she's just in quarantine. She's just in a scrub. I don't think it's a straitjacket, but
yeah, I don't think so either. But the way it's shot, it looks like she's in a straitjacket. She's filmed to look like she's crazy. This is how people see her. The
point I was getting at, I never got to the line, is that she says in the film, sense of adventure. And I actually think I agree more with that sentimentality that, that's partly why we should keep looking for aliens, because it's kind of fun. Exploring is good, and it does lead to a lot of scientific advancements because we find stuff and we learn more about things. But part of it is just kind of fun. We might find some goddamn aliens. That's kind of cool.
Sure, yeah. I do think from my, I did spend a lot of time going down the rabbit hole of Carl Sagan's works and stuff when I was younger, and very, very into astronomy, and I do think that this was his most important question, though, was just, are we alone? He really truly believed that was the most important question in the universe.
I mean, we're definitely not.
I don't know. Awful waste of space, right?
That would sound like a crazy person, but if there's one sentiment in this movie that I completely agree with, is that in all of the galaxies, all of the planets in those galaxies, and just the size of space, the size of the universe, the idea that there's not at least some worms or something on at least one planet somewhere is ridiculous. There has to there's too much of it.
Yeah.
There has to be.
I mean, I think that's the idea, is that it's happened once before, so there's 100% chance that it can happen again. And there's so many chances out there because there's so many planets, billions and billions and billions.
Yeah.
That, yes, it's likely we are not alone.
Yes. And they do overuse that line a little bit. It'd be, it'd be a waste of space if there wasn't any.
It's a good line.
She almost winks at the camera Maybe she doesn't. Maybe it's when she talked to the kid at the end because she says it again, and maybe it feels like she
her
could,
father
like,
said it to her when she was a kid,
yeah. So
and
she's
she
like
had the same question.
Passing this on, kind of thing. Yeah, dial back the sentimentality. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Who hurt you?
Like, I think sometimes when I speak about certain subjects, people probably think I'm like this cynical, but I'm actually really heartwarming in other ways. I just like there's certain like tropes of the way people are supposed to react to certain things that I just think are weird, and I'm like, I don't get why this is what people latch onto when, to me, what's more meaningful or more heartfelt is this other way of doing something. To me, like, I lean more cerebral, but there are definitely stories that lend themselves to a sentimental tone for sure. And I don't know. I don't know if this was ever going to quite work for me with the tone that it was going for. I think maybe that's fundamentally where it just doesn't click with me. As far as like critiquing it, like if I try to be objective and just sort of look at it for what it is, I would say that 2.5 hours is probably a bit too long. Probably tighten that up a little bit.
But you said you didn't feel it.
I said it was an easy watch.
I think 2.5 hours is exactly the length it needs to be, because nothing feels slow, nothing feels dragged. Like everything is there for a reason. I think it's the length of the film it needs to be, and it does feel epic, so it can have a longer runtime.
I do think John Hurt feels like a weird Deus Ex Machina character. I think he sticks out in that way. I do think it's overly sentimental and cheesy at points with its slow motion, or it's like, it leans in heavy with the piano sentimental music, and like there's moments where I just felt like it was overplaying its hand, and maybe that's partially a taste thing, but I do think like stepping away from my own like bias or the themes of the film and the philosophy of the film and what it's trying to say, where I do have some like clashes. Like if I remove myself from that, there are some things that I will critique throughout, but it's definitely the biggest problem obviously is just how much I clash with what it's going for, because ultimately at the end I'm kind of like, I don't think I agree with the point ultimately that you've made in this film, and it's very rare that I find myself feeling that way about like a movie, because normally I can like just be like, okay, this is what the character feels, this is what the I don't have to be, the character doesn't have to be like me for me to empathize with the character, but I think part of the trick of great storytelling and great filmmaking is when you can have a character who is so different from you, and somehow the storytelling makes them super relatable, or at the very least you understand exactly why they think the way they think, and why they're going to have the tragedy when they make the wrong choice, or why they're going to feel the way they do when you can see their decisions coming, or the poor decisions.
The Joker.
That's not a good example, it's a bad movie. But Taxi Driver, which is the movie that's kind of ripping off, much better example. So I think for me that I never felt that in this, because it kind of went to like the shortcut of sentimentality through that very, very 90s Hollywood, like uplifting piano music kind of feeling. It never quite clicked. So I never really felt like I kind of get into her head, and I never felt the journey. But it sounds like you did, though. It sounds like you really connected with the character. And, at face value, you've got a few more things to relate to, right away. But then, on top of that, you liked where it went with her story. Maybe this is just partly down to, like, the age you saw it at. Maybe it was just, it hit you at an influential age, and, like, whereas I didn't see it till I was a bit older, a bit more cynical, a bit more jaded. But there's definitely a time and place for giving up the cynicism, by all means. There's times when I think that's very powerful. I just think that this was never, I guess, cynical enough to begin with. Like right away, it's got that cheesy kind of Hollywood tone to it.
I think that Eleanor's character is cynical from, like, there's some cynicism there.
Oh, she is, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just with the people who are holding her back. Like, a lot of it comes from Tom Skerritt, and it's well deserved. And like there's even a line that I really love after they've met and they've shook hands and they said, you know, the good luck to you on your journey, basically. And he said, I'm sorry, I know this isn't fair, that it should be you, but like the world isn't fair, and you have to, like, people are going to take advantage of it, and you're just going to have to deal with it if you want to live in this world. And she's like, well, that's funny, I always thought the world was what we make of it. Like it's the people who choose to take advantage of others and to lie and to cheat who are making the world a bad place.
Which is what I've found more connecting. I felt more connected to that idea, because that's what I said earlier, is that her struggle and her line there is the world's what we make of it. It kind of goes into exactly what I was kind of saying about like how I think of people in theology. Like, you know, it's just more about us and like what we choose. So it's like she is cynical, and obviously there's other characters who are cynical about what she wants. But the movie itself never feels like it's like going to try and like break out into like it has that heartwarming kind of feeling to it right from the get-go. And
I don't know. I think the movie has a lot of cynicism in it.
Well, I didn't feel it. Like, I mean, you can tell me it's there, and the characters are technically cynical, but the movie's tone to me never felt cynical.
Even with all like the religion, like the radical religion parts of it too.
No,
or like the James Woods character, and
because he felt too much like a movie villain to me, you know, and maybe partly it's because it's James Woods. James Woods is James Woods, but like it always felt like a movie. I always felt like I was watching a movie with like where the hero's going to ultimately get to do the thing, you know. It's going to have I knew this was going to like have a heartwarming ending, and partly because I'd seen it before, but like I think it feels like a movie that's going to have a heartwarming ending. By the, you know, it has that feeling right from the get go.
Right. I mean, I think it earns its heartwarming to it.
Here's a perfect way of putting it. Right from the start, it feels comforting, and it always has a comforting tone. You're watching
her as a child with her father from the beginning. Her father, who is this great guy who like loves his daughter and is showing her the world and the universe and the excitement of what could be out there. Like it's meant to feel comforting.
But it always feels comforting though. Like it's comforting. She's meeting their friend.
Well, when she gets to be an adult, and Tom Skerritt is like pulling the plug on things, and she's constantly have to fight for herself and be loud and be heard, and she's still ignored and put in like another room while all the men are talking, and then like James Woods is there and he's cynical the whole time, and then the evangelicals show up and they're cynical the whole time. They're telling you this movie. Hey, let me finish. Like this movie is telling you that there's a lot of cynicism in this world, and she is going to break through it. But like she doubts herself. She doubts the world. Like as soon as they tell her, like, do you believe in God? She knows that she is done. Like that's it for her. And that's a cynical move for the film. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, but the movie itself never felt cynical. Like I always felt like she was going to break through. It always felt like our character's going to win ultimately. Like it always had that heartwarming kind of feeling to it.
I think the march of death to her tomb was not so motivating.
I don't know. What's funny is that I actually think Jodie Foster herself was in a better movie that dealt with being a woman in a man's world. And Silence of the Lambs is...
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go with a different film.
No. Silence of the Lambs is such... Like, right from the start, that movie makes it clear that she is at a disadvantage. And that she is being almost used as a tool because she is like a young female agent. We're going to send in her because it might excite the serial killer to like open up or something. And it is this thing where she's constantly having to... Well, you're making a face. You don't agree with this?
No, I'm thinking about it.
You know, because right away, like, there's a great visual at the start of that movie where she gets in the elevator and she's like a foot shorter than everyone else in the elevator because they're all tall men, and she's like just this little Jodie Foster with her, you know, her suit jacket on. She's like, yeah, I'm an agent too. And you know, they ask her if she doesn't want to be a part of the autopsy. She has to wait outside. Again, we actually have waiting outside while the men speak scenes in that movie as well. You know, and I know it's weird to compare the two, and it's like other than Jodie Foster, but they do actually have this in common. They have this theme of this young woman who is having to like prove herself in a profession that has been so male dominated, and they don't want to take her seriously. But ultimately, she is going to be the one who solves the case. And the weird thing about that movie is that she finds almost this encouragement in Hannibal Lecter, of all characters. This character who is not a good character, who is manipulative, who is malicious, but there's almost more power in some of like his encouragement actually being kind of true and genuine because it comes from this weird like dark place. And I guess what I'm saying is that this is almost so straightforward in its intentions that it's less interesting to me than A Silence of the Lambs because she finds her strength in a much darker world, in a much darker place, in a much more foreboding world. And I'm not saying this had to be like intense and like dark and put the lotion in the basket. Like, I'm not saying that. Although, hey, if Buffalo Bill was the alien at the end, like, it would get a point. No?
So what are you going to rate it then?
I was just a joke at the end. I was trying to crack a joke. I was trying to lighten the mood. Tara's no sell on it. Okay. Are you mad that I don't love it? Is that what this is?
No, I mean, I understand that people don't like this movie. I'm a little like, I know what you mean by the Hollywood feeling of the film, but I do think it's appropriate for this movie. Like nothing about the feeling or the piano music feels like it's taking me out of the story it wants to tell, you know? I'm not there with you.
That's okay. Somehow we survive having disagreements on movies. If Matthew McConaughey and Jodie Foster and this can coexist, then I'm sure we can. Not like in Contact. Or
yeah, I guess we can keep podcasting together.
Come on, I like all the important movies that you like.
I mean, did I not open with this being one of the most important movies to me in my childhood?
Yeah, but Predator's also important to you.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, Matrix is important to you. You know, there's been numerous films of which we have heavily agreed.
Yeah, it's fine. I think that I have a retort for your criticisms as to why I think this movie is very special, which is why I'm going to give it a 10.
10?
Yeah. I mean, I love it. Honestly, like I watched this movie again and I got emotional watching it. Like this movie is very important to me, and it is like I just it's so nice to have the hero's journey for a female not feel like she's special because there's some sort of ability she has. She just works hard, and she's I don't know. I love Eleanor. I think she's one of the best female characters ever put on a film. And I really do love this film. Like I think all the metaphors work for me. I think all the journey works for me. I think all the imagery is beautiful, and
do you know what?
And it's important to me.
I'm glad you do. This was a far more interesting conversation because you feel so passionate about this. I don't understand it necessarily. Like I get part of it. I get the relation to the character and whatnot, but like so much of this, like I got to the end and I'm like, does Tara still love this? Because like I'm feeling very iffy on a lot of what this movie's trying to say to me, and a lot of it is not connecting. And I know people like I can already see some comments saying, "Oh, you're just like you've went in with this bias," which I admitted at the start. Let me make that clear. But you went with this bias and you didn't let it like you ever let go of it. And I'm like, yeah, but there's tons of good movies that have religious themes that I love that make it work for me because they find a way to make the character's journey or make the core point of the story work, and it doesn't matter that I am different to the character. Like, so many of the best stories have characters that I would never relate to, or in some cases even like. Like, you know, some main characters are awful. Some main characters are so different. And I think, and obviously the problem here isn't the main character. I keep saying that as if it is. It's not. It's more the ideas and the other characters around her who are there to kind of like discuss those ideas. But I don't think this for me ever like got across that bridge, and I think there's a lot of other tonal things and a lot of other things that just kind of kept me from ever really getting super engaged with it. And I think, you know, I like some of the actual, you know, the actual hearing the messages. What is the message? Let's figure this out. Like that sort of like raw like sci-fi mystery stuff. Like when it's there is cool. But to me, that's almost why I wish it was just more ambiguous about, like, you know, I guess it kind of is ambiguous, but like, you know, I could have done without a scene of like talking to dead dad. Like I would have much preferred something a bit more cryptic or something, you know, something where we have to take meaning from it on our own, or, you know, whatever.
I don't see how that isn't what's happening in that scene.
It can still technically be what's happening, but it doesn't mean I enjoy the way it's playing out, or that I'm still sitting through a character talking to what looks like her dead dad. Like, I'm still getting the piano music playing as she's like crying, as she's looking at him, and like these things matter. These things, just because even if you can sort of technically say X, Y, and Z happened, how they happened, the way they're portrayed, like all of the other details do matter. Like the way it happens matters. Like all of that matters. All of that creates a feeling. So even though technically you can argue it's doing what I'm saying I want from it, it doesn't mean I feel it when I'm watching it. You know, it has to actually elicit those feelings, and I don't think this movie does. I think it feels very of its time. It feels very, you know, of that mid-90s time period. And it's just, you know, this feels, and this is not to say that I don't like this film, because I've not seen it in a long time and I can't remember. Like, I don't know how it's going to work for me now. But it feels like this and, like, very different plot, but it feels like this and something like Bicentennial Man and, you know, some other more heartwarming sci-fi movies of the 90s and to the start of the 2000s. Like, there's definitely, like, a sort of, like, sub-genre almost of, like, a feeling in there that you can kind of group together.
I mean, I definitely felt the Forrest Gump influence in this one.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's Zemeckis, though, so that
yeah
makes sense.
And not just, like, the superimposed James Woods behind, you know, President Bill Clinton.
Yeah. But, like, when it comes to science fiction from 1997, there's other good examples for me that I'm looking forward to reviewing at some point. So.
What are you rating it?
I'm saying that I really want to talk about Gattaca at some point. It's a much better film. I think that was 97 anyway. But yes,
I love Gattaca, yeah.
Yeah, what am I rating it though? Yes, I'll put this is 2 hours. My God, we've waffled on. I will. This is hard to rate this one.
Whatever your rating is, I won't react.
It's not just that. Like, I actually do, just on like, ignoring you, I actually do think it's a hard film to rate, because it is kind of in this weird place where I like some of the ideas. I think some of the performances, you know, Jodie Foster is good in the movie. Like, there's not
She's
a problem
great, yeah.
with her in her performance. I do think some of the dialogue that's given to her, but maybe more, it's more so the McConaughey character and some of the conversations they have where, like, to give us a lot of the ideas the movie wants to get across, it really has to just have them talk about it really bluntly. And some of those, you know, and there's a really bad effect shot early on where it's when they're at the party and they've went off to talk, and like I think like the satellite or something's in the background, and you can really tell they're on like a stage with a backdrop that's just, you know, they've superimposed it, or it's like a matte painting or something, and it feels like, and everything about it feels really oldie Hollywood, in that moment, because they're just talking about these ideas like really blatantly, rather than it feeling like a natural discussion to me. And I never really quite got away from that sheen. So I'm sorry, but I'm giving it a 6.
Okay.
Okay. We can wrap up.
What's coming up next week?
Somehow you got to pick the next thing, even though Contact's like one of your like important
The Patreons
special
picked
movies.
it, not me.
Technically, that's true.
And you put it on the selection, not me.
But I did it because I knew you liked it. I was being nice. if I
may have mentioned it a few times in these reviews.
Yeah, if I'd known how much I was going to be like, I might have avoided it to put off the pain. Not the pain of watching, it's more the pain of the debate. Hopefully, I hope this was actually a decent enough thing to listen to. I'm a little worried this was just kind of a back and forth on the main theme, and like not a lot of like the usual, talking about this moment and the weirdness of that little moment, or like, I feel like that some of our usual talk we didn't do.
Don't you dare edit this.
I'm not going to edit.
Okay.
Well, I'm not going to say I'm not going to edit any of it. I mean, if there's like a legit
No, that's
reason.
what I mean. Don't edit it.
But yes, From Beyond's coming next time on the show. And we can announce as well, actually, right now, that December, because you don't really get Christmas sci-fi, so there's no point in trying. December is going to be our third, not annual, because they're kind of weird. We had 2 close together in like the first year, and it's been a while, but we're going to do 70s month once again. And we're going to tackle some of the bigger 70s movies we've got left. And so the Patreon vote for next month will be a 70s vote. We'll pick out a few 70s movies, and the bonus movie next month as well will also be 70s. And the plan is to do an extra special episode sometime around New Year's, where we'll do a top 25 70s list each, and that'll be fun. So
25.
Oh, do you want to do 50?
Oh, boy.
I think 25 will do. Okay. So I think that's the plan. But yes, by all means, like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mail_fudge for channel updates, all these things. Actually, that's the TV channel. At Screams Midnight for the Mail Fuzz Movies channel, for specific updates for this. But yeah, like and subscribing, dinging the bell, all those things do help out YouTube channel, so please do. If you listen to the audio version, give us a 5-star review on iTunes or Podcast Addict or wherever you get your podcast from. And Tara will tell you about Patreon.
That's right, Peter. And if you enjoy our reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MilesFuzzTV. And if you donate us those $1 per month, you will get access to bonus episodes of The Ace, which we were just talking about, I believe. So if you enjoy our reviews of our blockbuster 90s films, maybe check out our 90s VHS rental film selection of movies on the Patreon bonus. I'm sure there's some there. What was that one we did with Rutger Hauer?
Oh, Split Second?
Split Second. Yeah, that was a 90s VHS blockbuster rental.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff on there. A lot of fun films to talk about. Some David Carradine specials.
Mm-hmm.
And some Gary Graham specials. He's always special, though. And soon we're going to have Jeffrey Combs. Wait, no, we're not. That's going to be on the regular channel. But there's going to be some sci-fi B movies that we could talk about.
Yeah, I'm sure Jeffrey Combs is in some bonus episode level material that we could do if we want.
Yes.
Tara's the
Because From Beyond will not be enough.
I suspect Tara's decided that already. So
Yes.
But Tara is going to pose for the thumbnails, so here we go. Look like you're listening for the stars, but also intent and thought like Jodie Foster. All right, 3, 2, 1, pose. Yeah. It was such a good
Nailed
idea for Vasta Night that she did that again for this one.
Yeah, it was Cosmos that we did it for.
Oh, was it Cosmos? I want to say we did it for both. I feel like they had similar things because they were both about listening for, you know, signals from space, kind of thing. Do you know, I actually, can I say something that's really maybe going to be controversial for Tara here?
You like Cosmos more than Contact?
No. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. But I'm going to make a comparison. One of the things we said, well, the main thing we even really that we said about Cosmos. If you haven't seen our Cosmos review, I highly recommend going and checking it out. It was a hoot of a review. But you know, it was about these three guys in a van who listen for space signals and blah blah. And it was a really low budget movie about them hearing first contact and all the stuff that comes with that, right? Very commendable effort in terms of like they did what they could with 3 actors and a small budget and all the rest of it. But the big thing we talked about is how they wrote the script and tried to treat it like it was some Hollywood epic because it had like all these like tense moments with music where they're trying to like race to get to a destination. And there was like sentimental stuff with like the now you get the team hat, you know, now you get the Cosmos hat. Is that, and I actually had this thought during Contact, which is why I'm glad you reminded me by mentioning it, is that in a weird way, the sentimentality and the over dramatization of Cosmos, like Contact kind of has it as well. The only difference is that Contact is actually a big budget Hollywood movie. So it fits better with Contact. But some of the problems I have with Cosmos are the same problems that I have with Contact.
How dare you? How dare you?
Look, she even has
Look, we've watched both of those films and they are not alike in any way.
She has the little compass that goes back and forth between her and McConaughey. That's like the red hat. That's like the red Cosmos hat.
Better hold on to it. It might save your life one day.
I knew that I was going to get a reaction. But that has been the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Thank you very much once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction. The computer. Add salsa.